Hi, and welcome to the Michigan History Nightmares video series, Volume 4, Book 6, How Michigan Became a State, Lessons from Beyond the Grave. My name is Lynn Smiles, I'm the author, and before we go ahead with the story, if you're just joining me for the first time, you are going to need your special imaginary Michigan pen. This will enable you to interact with the stories. So at the count of 3, I'm going to send it through cyberspace. So if you hold out your hand, are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Here it comes. Catch. Good job. Okay, now this story takes place on Christmas, and it's taught by ghosts. Now each ghost Katie and the gang meets involves them in a nightmarish lesson. So the story begins with Katie crossing the Delaware with George Washington on Christmas Eve. During this time, George Washington gives Katie a sneak peek into the Revolutionary War. Now at the end of the nightmare, George Washington warns Katie that she's going to encounter many more ghosts. So on the way to school that morning, Katie shares her dream with Gary and Nick. And Gary thinks it sounds kind of neat that it would be like the story of the Christmas Carol, being visited by ghosts from the past. So now, after the morning routine, the kids go to the library with their outlines on Daniel Boone, George Rogers Clark, General Anthony Wayne, and they enter the library. Click your pens. Whoa! When they walk into the library, they see these 5 new black shiny computers with the Tricon Dynamics logo, and they're not sure if they're supposed to be using these or not. So Mrs. Ojibwa hustles in, and she assures them that they're going to be using these 5 computers because they're going to be guinea pigs to see if these computers are kid-friendly. And so then she instructs the children to sit down and tells them a little bit about the computers. Number 1, they're quantum computers, and quantum computers are really quick, okay? So she feels that they have a handle on how to use a computer, so she starts walking out, and as she reaches into her pocket for a tissue, she feels something metal, and she thinks, oh my gosh, this could have been a disaster. So she hustles back into the classroom, and she asks Katie, do you have the Michigan pen? And Katie says, yes. Well, she has to see it. So Katie hands Mrs. Ojibwa the pen, and Mrs. Ojibwa instructs them, go ahead then and boot up your computers. Well, when they do this, a little drawer comes out of the side of the computer, and in the drawer is this ring, and they're instructed to put this ring on and wear it at all times while interacting with the computer. Now I'm going to stop for a second, because if you have this ring and you're wearing it, all the little colors will tell you how you're feeling as you're wearing your mood ring. So anyway, Katie turns around to ask Mrs. Ojibwa about the ring, and she thinks she sees Mrs. Ojibwa switching the pens. But then Mrs. Ojibwa's a little bit quirky, so Katie just kind of dismisses it. Now when Mrs. Ojibwa gives Katie the pen back, Katie asks, well, why are we wearing this ring? What does this have to do with Tricon Dynamics? And Mrs. Ojibwa seems a little confused, like she didn't know anything about this. And she said, well, she's going to go back to the classroom and check out the manual. So as Mrs. Ojibwa leaves, she thinks to herself, how clever are the Tricon Dynamics computer people to hide their Tricon logo under the Michigan logo. So as the children now are putting in their information, Katie says that Zach has a new bracelet on, and this bracelet has a picture of a wolf. And Zach explains that was an early Christmas present from his parents, and guess what? It even glows in the dark. Okay, now Helena, is a little nervous about the way Mrs. Ojibwa was acting, so we're going to pick up the story from there. Do you think she knows something about these computers that she's not telling us? Helena asked with a worried expression on her face. Time will tell, Nick answered. Computers were Nick's thing. Lately I'd been reading about quantum computers, parallel universes, and artificial intelligence. Is it possible that the Tricon computers are in fact artificial intelligence? This could get very interesting, he thought, eager to get started. And because these were new, the children figured that maybe they should press enter all at the same time. So on the count of 3, with a mixture of nervousness and excitement, the 5 children hit enter, At that exact moment, a freaky blue-green bolt of lightning tore across the eerie December sky. Electricity shot through the children, causing their hair to stand on end. Then snap! They found themselves launched with supersonic force through the computer. What was all that about? Gary asked while trying to get his bearings. What happened to silence, tingle, and voila? Looking around, the stunned group found themselves deep in the forest. So now what? Gary asked as he looked around for any signs of ghostly activity. Then, from out of nowhere, he appeared. Whoa, Gary cried, jumping back away from the apparition. Daniel Boone, the ghost of frontiersman past, I presume, Zach said, doing his best Henry Morton Stanley impersonation. The shimmering figure loomed before them. He wore a loose-fitting shirt made from animal skin. Buckskin leggings covered his legs. Hanging from his leather belt were a hunting knife, a hatchet, a powder horn, and a bullet pouch. A wide-brimmed beaver felt hat covered his head. A long rifle was slung over his shoulder. His horse stood by his side. When he spoke, his voice echoed softly through the trees. Yes, Zach, I am the spirit of Daniel Boone. I have been resurrected to take you on a journey that will teach you about an important time in my life. Are you ready? He didn't wait for an answer. The children immediately found themselves being swept up on the horse and heading back in time. Click your pens. Welcome to Boonesboro, the ghost said, making a sweeping gesture with his hand. Looking around, the children saw log cabins with stick chimneys like theirs. 26 cabins and 4 block houses, one at each corner, formed a large rectangle. A common wall surrounded the shelters. An area of green grass crisscrossed by dirt paths was in the center of the fort. This fort was built to protect the colonists from the raiding Native American war parties sent by Henry Hamilton, the British Lieutenant Governor of Canada at Fort Detroit. Leaders like Chief Blackfish of the Shawnees hoped to drive the Americans out of Kentucky and reclaim their hunting grounds. The British thought this was a smart way to beat the colonists. There are many more lessons to be learned during your stay at Boonesboro. Remember to be careful if you venture outside the fort. With these last words, Daniel Boone's voice began to fade. The ghostly figure disappeared, leaving Katie and her friends wondering what would happen next. Now the group decided to wait until dark before they went to explore the fort. And as they were out, 2 men came out from between some buildings and walked right past them. And the kids pinched themselves and all, they weren't invisible. And so Nick figured out they were in a parallel universe, and he warned the rest of the group not to touch anything that's living, or they might be pulled in to that universe with no way back out. So now let's see what happens the next time the group meets Daniel Boone. A sudden chill filled the room as the ghost of Daniel Boone appeared before them. We're off to the salt springs on Licking River. There you will learn about my capture led by Blackfish and his warriors, said Daniel, as he whisked the children from the cabin. Without the Michigan pen in hand, the children followed their leader into the woods. The group wasn't far into their journey when they heard a muffled sound approaching from behind. The muffled noise became a series of high-pitched howls as a pack of snarling wolves headed right for them. Run, Nick yelled. They can't see us. Remember, we can't let them touch us or we'll be pulled into their universe. Now the children took off running as fast as they could. Katie fell behind, trying to catch her breath. She looked back for a minute. The next thing she felt was the earth giving way under her feet. She was sinking. Luckily, the wolves had veered away and were running in a different direction. She yelled for someone to help, but her friends were too far away to hear her cries. The earth around Katie continued to sink. Without the Michigan pen, there was no way out. Katie began to cry. Click your pens. A twig snapped. Katie looked up. Just beyond the edge of the pit was a handsome gray wolf. The animal seemed to sense a disturbance in the area. He approached with caution. Katie grabbed the wolf's paw in desperation. If so, will she be pulled into a parallel universe with no way out to get back to her friends? Okay, now let's meet our next teacher, the ghost of General Anthony Wayne, as he teaches us about the Battle of Fallen Timbers. What you are witnessing is a gathering of several American Indian tribes known as the American Indian Alliance. They have banded together to fight against settlers in the Ohio country. You see, after the Revolutionary War, the relations between the tribes and the Anglo-American settlers were filled with tension. The alliance wouldn't commit to a peaceful treaty, so something had to be done. Our next session takes place at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, Wayne said. Now the sound of the rap tapping of the drum and the toodaloo of the fife ushered the group into their next lesson. The 5 children looked around and were amazed to see all the fallen trees strewn throughout the forest. Looks like this place was hit by a tornado, Zach said as he climbed over broken tree branches. It was a beautiful day in August. Birds could be heard chirping as they flew overhead. A pleasant breeze wound its way around the fallen trees, making for a delightful hike. I'm sure we weren't sent here to enjoy the scenery, Gary said. The peaceful silence was broken by a snapping sound from someone stepping on a branch. Zach was the first to notice gun barrels, several at a time, protruding from behind trees and bushes. Guys, get down. Find a place to hide, Zach said. His friends scattered, each in a different direction. From where they were crouching, they could see General Anthony Wayne and his troops. The troops were divided into 2 wings. Some soldiers were on foot, while others were on horseback. Then, without warning, shots were fired. Warriors came running from behind trees and bushes. "Stop! This is an ambush," the Shawnee leader cried. "We'll be hurting our own people." But it was too late. General Wayne's troop far outnumbered the Alliance warriors. Katie's group had a glimpse of Blue Jacket Shawnee followers retreating to Fort Miami. They were hoping the British would provide them with protection. However, the British refused to help the warriors. The battle was finally over. In all the commotion, the children lost track of one another. After waiting until the warriors and troops were far away, they carefully crawled out from behind the safety of their bunkers. The rat-a-tat-tat of the drum announced the arrival of General Wayne. With a satisfied look on his face, he sat up high on his mount. "Now, before I join my troops, I will bring an end to my chapter in the history." So, by the way, what happened to the other student? Weren't there 5 of you? Wayne asked, seeming to be put off that someone would miss this part of his story. Before the friends had a chance to look around and respond, General Wayne gave his last order. "Okay, then my lesson's over. Troops are dismissed." The 4 students stood at attention as mad General Anthony Wayne vanished into the evening. The rap tapping and the toodaloo trailed behind him. Click your pens. The once horrific, chaotic scene seemed to have been scrubbed from the forest. It seemed the attacks had never happened. Peace was once again restored to Fallen Timbers. Katie was the first to react to Zach's absence. "Did anyone see Zach once the fighting started?" she asked. No one in the group had seen what direction Zach had taken. "Let's split up and start looking," Gary said. "He's got to be close." Cries of, "Zach, where are you?" echoed throughout the woods. There was no answer. The sun had set. A sliver of moon playing peekaboo from behind the trees offered little light. The search party didn't realize they were only a few yards away from Zach, who lay trapped and unconscious under a fallen tree. Okay, now are you ready to meet the next famous ghost? Let me introduce you to Admiral Peary in the Battle of Lake Erie. The 6 ships over there belonged to the British Royal Navy. We needed to defeat the British in order to control Lake Erie. This would keep the British from getting supplies, Peary explained. It was then that the first cannonball whizzed through the air, slamming the Lawrence broadside and leaving a gaping hole. The deafening shots exploding from the guns sounded like the loudest firecrackers on the 4th of July. Click your pens. Peary immediately took charge. The 5 new Navy sailors ran for cover on the opposite side of the schooner. The Lawrence took several more hits. Katie and the others never saw the incoming cannonball. It hit with such force that it knocked Zach into the water and injured many of the crew members. The 4 friends didn't know what to do. There was no one to help. They could barely see Zach as he struggled to stay afloat. The fierce fighting continued. From where they were crouching, the children could see that the other American ships were not doing well. Helena looked back to where she had seen Zach. She squinted, trying to see through the smoke. Zach was nowhere in sight. "Does anyone see Zach?" she yelled above the fracas. It was difficult to see anything from where they were positioned. Without saying a word, Gary jumped into the water. He swam in the direction where Zach had last been seen. He had to save his friend. Zach fought with all his strength to keep from going under. His arm ached and his chest hurt from his efforts to reach the shore. He could hear the blast as cannons hurled shot after shot at the nearby ships. Gunshots echoed in his ears. "I'm so tired. I don't think I can go much further," Zach thought. He began to slip under the water. "Hang on, Zach," Gary yelled. "I'm almost there." Gary was in a few feet of Zach when he felt something wrap around his ankle. He yanked his leg, trying to free himself from whatever had entangled him. During his struggle to get loose, his other leg became tangled in the tendrils growing beneath the leg. Gary began to dog paddle, trying to keep his head above water. The harder he tried to break loose, the tighter the grip of the snake-like fingers became. Gary was winded. He knew he had to stop fighting against whatever had him in its grasp. He began to tread water, which worked for a while until Gary's arms cramped. "Help!" Gary yelled, hoping someone might hear him above the pounding of the cannons. He looked around to see if anyone had heard his cry. He could only see ships being struck and shattered by cannonballs and smoke from the discharge of guns. No one's coming. And where's Zach, he thought, as they slowly slid under the water. Okay, I'm going to stop there and click your pens. And this is the link for volume 4. And this is like a little field trip, a virtual field trip to Fort Herod and Fort Boonesborough. And I used the Fort Boonesborough field trip just to get a feeling of what it would be like to live there. So I got a lot of my information from there. So this brings us to the conclusion of the Michigan History Nightmare series. And I'd like to take a minute, though, to thank Mrs. Ojibwa for truly making Michigan history exciting this year. Thank you, Mrs. Ojibwa. You are awesome. Okay, now I hope these videos encourage you to be enthusiastic readers who are eager to learn about the history of Michigan and our great state. Now, if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. And please share my videos with viewers that you think would enjoy taking a wild journey through Michigan history with Katie and the gang. Thank you for joining me, and click your pens. As always, sweet dreams.